What is good people? You are now listening to another episode of Since We Last Spoke with Danny Foxworth. I am your humble narrator, Danny Foxworth, and this time this is a very special episode because today is the 34th anniversary of Hurricane Hugo. If you grew up in the Low Country and you're of a certain age, especially in the late 80s, you know all about Hurricane Hugo and the havoc that it caused. So just to give you a brief synopsis, it started as a tropical disturbance off the coast of West Africa on September 10th. By September 11th, it became a tropical storm, which was named Hugo. By the 13th, it was making its way across the Atlantic and intensified into a hurricane. By September 17th, it just, again, hit up Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands and just caused a lot of destruction in its wake. Next day, it hit the island of Guadeloupe on the 18th and made its way back into the Atlantic. And then that's where the question marks started to pop up, because it was in the Atlantic. And then it seemed like each day it would make a more northwesterly turn towards the East Coast. And yeah, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And I brought two guests on who were also from the Low Country that experienced this along with me in their respective territories. And I want to introduce Gerard Droze and Terrance Elmore. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Terrance, I want to start with you. Describe how you felt when you realized that Hugo was going to make a turn towards the Carolinas.
Okay, so I have been hearing stuff from older people, descriptions about like what a hurricane is and stuff. And I was telling my wife this the other day, like one person was saying that like when hurricane comes, it's like some sort of beast or something that kind of just tears stuff up. So, at that age, I'm just like, all this is coming through with a storm. So I was kind of anxious and kind of like, trying to figure out what was going on. Because, back then around that time, they were talking about the lizard man and stuff. So I was just like, we got another problem coming here. So I was just like, man. Yeah. So I didn't know, because we left like late, like the last minute we left the house. So I just didn't really understand like about a hurricane. I just knew it was like a really big storm. And I was just like anxious and not really scared, but just anxious and nervous.
And Gerard, talk about your perspective.
I don't really remember much from before the storm, except for coming home from school and remembering we're not going to school the next day. Like they already knew school's canceled tomorrow. We were in the process of building the house that my parents live in now, that I grew up in. So before that, we were in a mobile home. It was just basically, we're in the rural area of Somerville. We've got the mobile home next door to the home that's being built. So because it wasn't finished yet, we couldn't go in there, and stay. So where I live, a lot of family land, I can stand on my parents' front porch, look to my left and see my grandparents' house, like maybe a 1/10 of a mile right down the road. So because, they had a house and it was all bricked up, we decided we were going to stay with them. So we stayed in Somerville. And like I said, I don't remember much before the storm, other than the fact there was these new kind of chips that my dad brought home, and they were Ruffles Ranch chips. Y'all remember back, when Cool Ranch used to have like the blue and red seasoning on it?
Yep.
Well, the Ruffle Ranch chips had the blue and red seasoning on it. I was like, oh, we got some new chips. And I was hyped about that. But, keep in mind, I was 11 years old. So it didn't take much to get me excited. But that's all I remember before the storm actually hit. Knowing for sure we weren't going to school, and Daddy bought us some new chips.
That's back when Jay Leno was doing the Cool Ranch Doritos commercial.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man,
absolutely.
So for me, I was a big weather geek as a kid anyway, so I always kept my eyes and ears peeled on the local news. And whenever I saw that the hurricane was making its way towards the Carolinas, but they didn't know exactly where it was going to make it the exact landfall. It was still that cone of uncertainty, as they call it now.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember flipping through the channels, and Bill Walsh was on channel 4 at the time, and
right.
OG Charlie Hall was on channel 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And leading up to, and considering the technology back then, because back then it was really only like maybe the forecast was only like maybe 3 or 4 days ahead. It's not like the 10-day forecast like it is now. Right. And I like every night I was looking like, where's it going to go? Where's it going to go? Then they were saying like it's going to go towards Savannah. And then they said it was going to go towards Myrtle Beach. And then on the 20th, they were like, it's looking like it's making a beeline straight to Charleston. And I was like, oh no. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a little concerned. And then on the 21st, like I remember watching the news that evening, and then around 7:00, I don't know if do y'all remember when you remember Linda Lombard when she made she had that press conference? Well, anyway, she worked in some capacity with the city of Charleston, and they preempted whatever was on, and they had a live press conference, and it was starting to get dark, and the wind started to get a little bit windy around that time. And she said Hurricane Hugo has now strengthened to a Category 4 storm. And I'm like, oh my God. And I remember watching Live 5 News, and the look on Charlie Hall, this man was my hero, and to see the shook look on his face, my 9-year-old brain was like, we're about to die. And we already had planned that we were going to stay, weather the storm at my grandparents' house like UG, because she has a brick house and she lives right next door to my parents. So I'm like, all right, yeah, we'll go over there, but we're not going to make it through the night. And I remember saying that to my sister. I'm just being Mr. Doomsday over here. And so talking about your family and friends, when like leading up to it, did y'all have any conversations with your friends about the storm approaching?
Hey, I don't remember much about the days before. I remember more about the days after than anything. Like I don't remember anything about anticipating the storm or hearing people talk about it. And that's not to say that they weren't doing it. And I can't even use the I'm so old excuse, because it's like, Terrance, you a year behind me, Danny, you 2 years behind me, and y'all remember this stuff way better than I do. So maybe I just don't remember. I wasn't paying attention, but it wasn't a whole lot beforehand that I really remember. Like I said, it was just, oh, we don't have to go to school tomorrow. Bet. I had no concept of what else was going on in the world. I had new chips and no school the next day. It's whatever. I don't know what's going on. And, when they say ignorance is bliss, I can understand why, because I had no idea the severity of what we were about to go through.
That might be the show title: New Chips, No School.
Yeah, right.
So, Terrance, did you have any encounters with your friends regarding the storm?
I don't remember either. I don't even remember the not going to school part. I remember like the conversations that I heard might have been like the night before and the day of. But as far as talking to my friends and stuff about it, I don't remember. I doubt I did, because like I said, I didn't realize the quote unquote severity. Well, for my young mind to, ponder on is when we actually had to leave and go to a shelter. It was like, okay, so this must really be a serious thing. And then seeing everybody kind of getting in the car and leaving and stuff, that's when I kind of understood. But yeah, I honestly don't remember having conversations about it beforehand. Well, with people my age, rather.
Yeah. I had, one of my absolute best friends from elementary school was Stephen Furtick, and he and I used to talk on the phone all the time. And the afternoon that the storm was supposed to make landfall, we talked to each other, and I remember we were just talking about how concerned we were with the intensity of which the storm was going to be bringing us wind. And I'll never forget, we said the Lord's Prayer right before we hung up, and that was that. And we didn't talk to each other after a while after that. I mean, because of reasons beyond our control. But
yeah.
I vividly remember having that, and for a short period of time, that did give me a sense of calm after I hung up. But then I saw Charlie Hall, and then all my anxiety just came back up again. I'm like, great. So after taking shelter, do y'all remember how y'all felt whenever Hugo actually made landfall?
I can tell you. So we went to a school. I don't even remember what school it was. I know it wasn't my school, but and also, yeah, we were living in North Charleston at the time. So we really felt it more, where I used to live at. And I remember hearing the gym doors, because everybody was in the gym, hearing the gym doors rattle. And so in my mind, I was like, that's that beast thing everybody's, they were talking about trying to get in. And I'm like, is it going to get in? And it was kind of cool when we got in there, because it was some kids there, and, we had our little pallet. It was just me, my mom's, and my little sister, because my pops, he was in New York for, I think, like a funeral or something. And, back then we didn't have cell phones. So I remember, my mom's talking to him, and I have to ask her if he's the one who was like, go ahead and go to the shelter. But I remember them talking on the phone, and then we actually caught a ride with one of the neighbors to the shelter. And just being in there, just hearing it. And then, like, when the eye came through, I thought it was over, but, I remember hearing people saying, like, that's not it. It's not over. And then the wind kicking back up again. And just the whole time I'm wondering if the roof is going to come off, if the doors are going to fly open, is like all this going to come inside. And so I just went to sleep. I was like, the best way I can handle this is just go to sleep. So that's what I did.
Word. G, what was your experience?
There's a reason you heard me laugh when you first asked that question. I think I was asleep before I heard the first wind blow. I don't remember nothing at all about the storm. I remember the next morning my parents talking about when the eye came through, they actually went outside, and how deadly calm and silent it was. It was just almost eerie, they said, how quiet it was in the eye of the storm. But then as the wind began to blow again, they came back inside, and that was, just trying to not be out there and catch a stray. So yeah, I know about what happened during the storm from what people told me happened, because I was somewhere in my grandparents' house, knocked all the way out completely. I don't remember anything about that storm except for how clear the sky was the next day afterwards.
And for me, I think I might have been the only person in the house that stayed awake during the entire storm, because I was so convinced that we were going to die. I'm like, if I stay awake, I won't die.
No, you'll see it coming.
Yeah. Even though it's pitch black outside. But I remember every boy, and Papa, boy, he was sawing logs. Great day, he was sleeping hard. I mean, off through the storm. And I just remember trying to peek out the window to see what was going on. And of course, I couldn't see anything. The power was already knocked out. But like you,
standing at the window during a hurricane is not a smart move, Danny.
Yeah.
I mean, you know that now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 9 years old. I'm doing everything I can to not die and putting myself in very bad positions. But I remember just listening to the wind, and just like how they said, it sounded like a train. And to me, it really did sound like a train. And like you alluded to, G, when the eye passed through, I thought it was over too. And so I was the only person to walk outside and look. And I was so amazed that you had all this 135 mile an hour sustained winds. And then all of a sudden the eye passes through. and it's super quiet. Like you said, it's an eerie calm. And I look up and you can actually see the moon and the stars. I'm like, that is amazing.
Clear sky in the eye.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then Act 2, I was like, all right,
Wow.
let me take my ass back in this house. And then for the second part of the hurricane, that's when I actually fell asleep. And then I remember waking up the next day, sunny as all outdoors. I mean, it was blue skies like nothing happened. Well, if you look at the sky, you would think nothing happened. Then you look at your surroundings and you're like, oh, wow. This thing made a mark.
Yeah.
So
you know what I remember that next day though, Danny?
What's that?
Aside from how clear the sky was, the entire outdoors smelled like pine.
Yes.
From all the broken trees.
Wow.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
To this
and now
day,
I'm thinking about it. I think my little brother was a baby back then. That tells you how young I was. I think my little brother was a baby, I believe. Yeah, he might have not been one yet when everything happened. But
no memory of that.
Yeah. The aftermath was the big thing, man. That was the real like thing that stuck out to me, was like everything after, like when the shelter doors opened, and it's just like, whoa.
Yeah.
So
and my thing was, we went outside to kind of like survey the damage and see how the neighbors and stuff were doing. And I just remember having to step over so many trees. And then after a while, we got to the point where like, all right, come back, because there's down power lines out here. You might mess around, step on one, and it might be live. So we had to be careful about that. But I will say that was the day I learned how to use an axe, because we lived on a rural road, man. I don't even know if at that time, I don't think the road we were living on was even paved. So if anybody needed to get out and get to work, or an emergency happened, or if somebody needed to come in to help, we had to actually clear the street. Now, I don't know how much I was doing as an 11-year-old axe holder, but I learned the proper technique. The lower hand stays steady. The offhand, the top hand goes at the top of the axe handle, and you slide your hand down as you chop. You just don't swing the whole thing. You got to bring it in controlled. So, 30-some years later, I still remember how to use an axe. I hadn't used one easily in probably 20-some years, but, I got it. I'll never lose memory. Thanks to Hurricane.
Right.
So, Terrance, when you left the shelter, how hard was it to get back home?
Man, as far as I can remember, it wasn't that difficult, but the route that we took back wasn't the same that we got there, because there were like some cars in the road, some destroyed houses, and all I could think about is like going home is like, we probably don't have anywhere to live, because I saw some houses that were still okay, and then some that were just completely gone. Seen like a boat inside a house or something like that. It was was complete chaos. Like going home, I was just like, man, everything is gone. And like at that age, I was just like, man, my G.I. Joes and my Legos are gone. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Priorities, man. Priorities.
Right. But that's what I remember, just like trees down, of course, debris in the road, like branches and stuff like that. But the things that really stuck out were the houses, like how some were gone, some were there, and like stores and stuff. Like even though everybody taped up and kind of try to, do whatever with the windows, they were still broken. And at that time when I was little, I thought like the tape was supposed to stop, like the windows and stuff are being broken, but you get older and you learn is to keep it, like if it does break, it has like bigger pieces and kind of keeps it together. So I was like, man, the tape didn't work, because look at these windows, they're gone.
I thought the same exact thing. So
taping would do but so much against 135 mile per hour.
Yeah. So for me, I remember, just like when you, to this day, like you said, Gerard, anytime I smell pine, like my mind instantly goes back to Hugo. Because
Yep.
you were 100% right. As soon as I walked out of the house, just an overwhelming smell of pine trees that had fallen over. And I remember, because I live in a rural area just like Gerard did, and I remember everybody in the neighborhood, you just hear chainsaws like, everywhere. I mean, everywhere. And I mean, it's like, all right, we surveyed the damage. Now it's time to go to work.
Time to clean up.
Yeah. And that was something. And just the cleanup stage, it was such a long, arduous process. I think we were without power for about a month. And yeah. And the thing with that I think the one advantage that we had was, even though I think we were one of the only people in the community that has a well. So people needed water, they would come to our house, they would stop by, pull up in the yard, we'll get the bucket. Hey, we'll get you some water, and just bring your buckets, and we'll get you all right. And yeah, I just remember just wondering, when are we ever going to get power again? And
yeah.
So what was it like for y'all in that regard?
I don't think it was a month. I just remember us not having power for a long time. I remember the water being brown for a while. They kind of got that straight. But when it wasn't brown anymore, I remember having to boil it. I was having to boil it. And it took a while for my pops to get down, of course, through everything. And you got to imagine, like, back then, just wondering, and I can only imagine what he was going through, wondering if we were okay, because the phones didn't work.
Yeah.
The phone lines were down. There was no power. So it was just like, man, it took a while for everything to kind of, not really settle down, but to kind of get into a routine of how to do stuff. Like, we had a cooler, and, the stores kind of open, that could open, and you got some ice and, little packs or whatever. And I just remember, like, us pretty much doing everything on the grill. Like, I remember having eggs on the grill and just different things, stuff like that, because that was the only way we could eat, because we didn't have a gas stove. Right. So, I just remember that sort of thing, like that I think the phone might have been the first thing that came back on before the power, I want to say. But it was a long time, at least 2-3 weeks. I don't know about a month, but it probably was at least 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know for us, it was about 3 weeks. And the one thing I remember distinctly about the power being out is that the first day we went back to school, we still did not have power. So we were getting, first of all, in 1989, when at a time in South Carolina, the TV stations weren't not even 24 hours. Like, TV went off after and like after the Tonight Show, after whatever, the national anthem played, you stood up and you saluted the flag and you carried you behind the bed, because there was nothing else to watch.
Yep.
I don't even think at this time we had satellite, like not even the big like network television satellite. We didn't have nothing. It was like ABC, CBS, NBC, ETV, and I think Fox had just started somewhere around that time.
Yep.
Other than that, it was done. I remember having, through all of that technology, I remember somehow we knew when it was time to go back to school. And that first day, somehow we got up on time, caught the school bus with no internet, no email. I don't even know if the postal service was working at that time. Like, how did we know it was time to go back to school? I really have no idea. All I know is when we got off the bus that afternoon, the transformer, like right at the corner before we get out to Highway 16, the main road, was back on the pole. It was a new pole up. And we left the school that morning in the dark, literally and figuratively, and came home. We have finally had power back for the first time since the hurricane hit. So I don't, like I said, man, I don't know how we knew. I guess maybe it was something on the news, but the only way we were able to watch any news a little bit was that we had a little portable handheld television that took probably about 6D batteries to project a picture on the screen that might have been about 5 inches in black and white with a pull-out stick antenna. And that was when, I mentioned earlier that the TV stations didn't even play 24 hours. Hurricane Hugo was the reason for the local television stations to begin to air 24 hours, because for the few people who had electricity, that was the way we were getting our information and our news. And for us who didn't have electricity, we were able to get our hands on some D batteries and actually watch it on the little TV. But of course, everybody needs D batteries, so you better not be watching that TV for too long, because we might need those a little bit later for some important information. So yeah, that's what I really remember about that aftermath, man. I have no idea. How did we know it was time to go back to school?
Wow.
And somehow we got ready to go back in the dark with no electricity. And that was just wild to me. I still think about it. I don't know how we did that back at that time.
I know for us, we always had like the radio on. So maybe that's how like we knew about certain things. Because I remember there was a point where they were, I guess, giving everybody assistance, like food stamps or whatever. So everybody, I remember just going to that line. It was like just like everybody seemed like, because everybody needed it. Everybody, I guess that was their like relief for the area or whatever. And I remember like the Swan, that was the first time we kind of got onto the Swan, man, the little truck.
Yeah.
He came
up through my neighborhood.
Yeah. Like them patty melts. Oh man, them patty melts was busting. But that was how we got onto the Swan, man. Like he came through and it's like everybody was going there getting their food or whatever, man. So yeah.
And Terrance, you mentioned something also that reminded me when I fell in love with the grill. Hurricane Hugo, because like you said, every single meal was cooked on the grill.
100%.
So, you begin to love that flavor, love that taste, and it's like, wow, so I can wait until we don't have a storm to do this. And I think since then, I've really been. Now I'll tell you, I did not have the same experience with the Vienna sausages. That was the end of Vienna sausages for me. Hurricane Hugo ruined Vienna sausages forever. I will never eat another one again in my life. But it absolutely put me on to grilled food for real. And I've been smoked, grilled ever since.
And I remember during the aftermath, as far as food goes, I remember there was an 18-wheeler that pulled up. I think it was in town. And they were giving out just all these rations. And Lord have mercy, the amount of peanut butter and powdered milk I consumed in that month. That boy, I was thankful that we had something to add to the Frosted Flakes, but boy, that powdered milk my stomach and that powdered milk did not get along at all. Boy, oh boy, I learned. Yeah, that was a crash course lesson right there, buddy. I never want to experience that again. And I was sick of peanut butter for a long time, and the Vienna sausage, just like you said.
But did y'all come up on anything else though? Because I remember at the church there was a 18-wheeler dropped off like loads of donations, like clothes, toys, all kinds of
toys,
stuff. I remember distinctly. If you have a yearbook photo or just a school photo of me from 1989 school year, I'm wearing a blue and white striped rugby that I got from that truck that dropped off a bunch of stuff. Now, did I need stuff? Did I lose clothing during Hurricane Hugo? No, my house was fine. Yeah. Everything was good. But hey, man, they're giving it away for free and they got you out here working. But like, can I have this? All right, take it home.
Hey, free is my favorite flavor.
Absolutely.
But I don't remember the clothing truck, because just like you, I was, as far as the condition of my clothes after the storm, they were fine. But
yeah, we were just
low on food because all our stuff was were perishable items.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of canned peaches. Shout out to Dole, boy. Dole held us down. Dole held us down. So
now, did you learn at that time also not to touch dry ice?
Nah, I never handled the ice.
We didn't have any dry ice, but
oh man, listen, we had dry ice, and they actually put it in the freezer.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, oh, okay. Oh, so it's ice. Don't touch it.
Oh,
well, why not? Yeah, dog. You don't want to burn your hand on dry ice. It looks cold. It ain't cold.
So how long did it take before your communities were back to normal?
Mm. I I don't know, man. I can tell you it was still in progress, of course, by the time we went back to school. So I remember going back to school probably about 3 weeks after the storm. Like I said, we didn't have electricity when we left for school that day, had it when we got back home. But I just remember, like, even though you could like see that people had cleaned up and life started getting back to normal, for years afterwards, there were always signs that the storm came through and kind of left their mark on the area. One of the things I'll never forget was for and I, like literally years. This is probably up until maybe early 2000s. There was a tree behind my aunt and uncle's house who lived across from us. And it was one tree that fell onto another tree, but it didn't fall all the way. It was just leaning on the other one. For years, when the wind would blow, those trees would rub together and they would make a squeaking sound if you were outside.
Wow.
For years, those trees were like that until they finally cut them down and cleared more land around the house. But it was a very long, like, that was one of those things where I would go to visit my parents and I'd come back home and I'd look across the way and I'd see those two trees leaning on each other. I was like, dang, those trees are still there. That tree hadn't broken through whatever it's leaning on. Who knows? They may have started to grow together. I don't know. But I'd never forget, the wind would blow and you'd be outside and those two trees. And it was always a reminder that, yeah, life is back to normal. We lost a lot of things. Our life was sidetracked for a little bit, but never forget these two trees leaning against each other, making that squeaking sound. And that was always there. It's kind of like a reminder of, the storm came through, it changed a lot of stuff, but we're still here.
Yeah. So Terrance, how about you? Like how long do you think it was until your community was back to where it was pre Hugo?
Man, I'm pretty sure a while. I used to have to walk to school, but I'm just like, it just seemed like it was too far to be walking. But anyway, I remember when we went back to school, like still seeing some of the debris. It was kind of cleared out, but it was stuff that was still there. Like they didn't fully come get, but for the most part, it was cleaned up, and that took a while. I know it was like well after Christmas, like that stuff was still there. In fact, I rode past there like a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just like, they really had us walking to school. This seems too far to be having kids walk to school, but along that path, I know there was this one spot that had like a lot of stuff that took a long time. And of course, we got all that snow right afterwards, so that kind of put a halt to the cleaning up that they were doing.
Yeah.
And I remember my aunt, she used to pastor a church in Allendale, and I remember going to church with her, and it was this boat that was in like the side of the road. Like for the longest time, that boat was always there, like on the way to Allendale. Like, and I know that boat had to be there for months, like a long time before they finally cleared it out the way.
Yeah, and it took a while before our community was really back to what it was prior to the hurricane. And I remember when we got our power back, I'll never forget when it came back on. I think we were probably the second to last or the last house in the neighborhood to get power. But I remember when the power came on, is right when the Cosby Show was about to come on. And boy, you could not wipe that smile off my face. Man, I was like, boy, this is divine timing right here. But then I remember watching the Hugo retrospective shows on like on Channel 4 and on Channel 5 and Channel 2, and which I went back, they actually have those on YouTube, and I went back and watched them, like seeing Rob Fowler looking all, he's all skinny and whatnot, but just seeing the aftermath outside amongst corners, seeing what the mess looked like in Charleston, because I mean we didn't know because we didn't have power, and seeing all of the boats and houses just all bunched together like toys. I could not wrap my mind around that. and then seeing the Ben Sawyer Bridge like swung out of its frame and tilted sideways. That's forever etched in my memory. I was like, what? Just not realizing how powerful the storm was. But man, that was an experience. Yeah. Any last words?
I mean, I think one of the biggest things I remember from the aftermath, like Terrance touched on, is that in my lifetime, growing up between, Georgia and South Carolina, I only remember one white Christmas. And it was the Christmas after Hurricane Hugo, 1989.
Yep.
We got snow on Christmas Day. And other than that, I mean, South Carolina is one of those places where, if you don't get your snow by MLK Day, you probably not getting snow that year. And particularly in, Charleston, Somerville, Low Country area, those were the areas that were the least likely to get the snow because of the temperature. It's always a little bit warmer. It's not quite going to accumulate. It's not going to stick. So for the, Berkeley, Dorchester, Charleston County area to get snow that close to the coast, I almost think it was because of the hurricane, because strangely, man, even
me too.
Earlier this year, after that hurricane passed through, even though I'm in Columbia now, there is nothing here that we really had to worry about for any hurricane that has been threatening South Carolina. There's something about after the hurricane passes through, like the air is different, the temperature is changed. Like I don't think we've had a day in Columbia since the last hurricane passed through that was above 90. Like the hurricane came through and shut summer down. It's like is low for that. It's quiet right now.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I remember. I don't remember so much leading up to the hurricane. I definitely don't remember anything during it because I was out. But afterwards, just kind of how, sometimes I almost look at it as like a metaphor for life. You have to go through your trials and your struggles. And then when you go through them, you got to clean things up a little bit to get them back in order so you can live the life that you want to live. But it's never quite the same afterwards. And honestly, when that hurricane came through, I think it took things with it. It left destruction, but it took a lot of things with it that we just didn't need to carry on anymore. So I think about that anytime I see a storm, I hear about a storm. It's just like, okay, that's unfortunate. And I hate that people are going to have to suffer because of this natural phenomenon, but hopefully it washes away things that they don't need to hold on to any longer. And hopefully it puts them in a position where they can build anew without the things that were previously that they were holding on to, but the only way they could let go of them was for the storm and to come in to take them away. So that's just really my thought about Hurricane Hugo and just the storms that come in general, man. They're not necessarily what we want, but sometimes, depending on our perspective, they can be exactly what we need. So that's really what I take away from that experience. As an 11-year-old, I wouldn't have told you any of that. But now with the gift of hindsight, I can look back with some perspective and have a different outlook on things. And that's kind of where I approach things from now.
I need that Hammond organ and that collection plate, dog. That's how that's how you sew it up right there.
Yeah, I should have went first.
Man, I'm telling you. Go ahead, Terrance.
Yeah. Well, I don't have anything as eloquent, but I will say that it made me understand like a sense of community, because even though some of the people we interacted with stuff we really didn't know, but everybody was putting in their hands together. Everybody was trying to make sure that everybody was okay. And even afterwards, like when it came to like food and people grilling out stuff, like if you had some extra, you had something, you made sure the people around you had something to eat and were taken care of as well. And then matter of fact, my little brother was definitely born because we got into a car accident coming from my grandmother's house, like when that snow started. And it was like really coming down. Somebody ran us off the road, and this lady came by, and we ended up having to stay at her house because the snow was so bad. I think she was like an off-duty deputy or something like that. But just that, like us staying there and like the next day when everything was clear, making sure we got home and then like a tow truck pulled the car out or whatever. But like that sense of like just people taking care of each other, like even though there were tragedies, like for us, we were in like two different things having to deal with the weather. And I'm just like, man, I thought snow was this great thing, but obviously it's dangerous too if you're in a car. And, you know, just seeing like a hurricane to a snowstorm, and I always equate the two. Like every time we have like a hurricane come through, I'm just looking for snow because I'm just like, it seems like that's when it happens. Either we get snow or a really bad ice storm.
Ice storm.
I'm always hoping for snow, but most of the time we get a really bad ice storm.
Yeah.
So those are the things I kind of took from it.
Man, you know, y'all left no crumbs on the plate. I got nothing. I mean, y'all sewed up the everything so great. Like G talking about the storm being also a metaphor for life, and Terrance, you talking about the importance of community and people looking out for each other. And I'm like, all right, what do I wrap this up with? And I wrap this up with, thank you for listening to Since We Last Spoke with Danny Foxworth. It's hard to believe it's been 34 years since Hurricane Hugo, but man, time flies. Make sure you like, download, and subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. I'm at Danny Foxworth 843. You can watch the video version of the podcast on there. And for Gerard, Terrance, and myself, this has been another episode of Since We Last Spoke. And until next time, y'all be good. Peace.